Good evening, everyone. Just thought it's 6 o'clock, so I just thought we would actually get the session going. So thank you for everyone that's come along tonight and to show your interest in becoming a council member. It's really good to see a turnout because I must admit I did have this fear that I would be talking to an empty room tonight. So for those people that don't know me, my name's Sharon Perkins and my role at the town of Gawler is the Executive Manager of Finance and Corporate Governance. Also like to know Chris. I think most people that live in Gawler and around Gawler know Chris, who's our CEO. So he will actually also be speaking tonight. And we have Susie, who's our team leader of governance, and we just have Donna and Tori, other staff in the room. So just from a communications perspective. So just some housekeeping. We do have an event in the James Martin room that is due to commence at 7 o'clock, so it is an opera, so hopefully there won't be too much of a noise disturbance either way. Obviously, just a bit of other housekeeping, if you can turn your mobile phones off to silent. For those people that haven't been into the Civic Centre, if you need to go to the toilets are just left. What we've also got, obviously, if you need to evacuate, just follow staff. Fortunately, because of the event, we do have lots of staff here that can make sure that you will be escorted out safely. The session is being live streamed and so will be available on our YouTube page after the session. So we will have an opportunity for you to have questions at the end of the session. But you'll have to actually ask those questions with a microphone so they actually come through on the YouTube. If you do not want to use a microphone, we do actually have some paper over there, so you can actually write down your question and we can either respond to it at a later date or we can actually read it out on your behalf. So. And the other final thing is we do have staff here that are going to be taking photos. So if you don't want your photo put on any of our website or anything or Facebook, can you just please let us know and we'll make sure that that's actually not posted. So before we get into the session, I just wanted to acknowledge that the land we meet today on is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. And we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Guardian people as custodians of the Greater Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the living Kaurna people today. So the purpose of this session is actually to help to provide some information to prospective candidates for the upcoming election that's being held in November. I just want to point out that as council, we're not actually running the election, so that is actually run by Electoral Commission. So we might not have all your answers to your questions, but we'll try and give you a bit of a introduction to what you could actually expect if you do nominate and if you are successful. Sorry. Would be right. Susie, can you just move it? Sorry, I'll fix that up in a minute. So we have actually broken up the session into three sections. So Chris is actually going to talk to you about what we do at council, some of the current emerging trends and projects. So just so you get a bit of an idea about some of the items that we'll actually do, what you may deal with if you are actually elected onto the council and the types of decisions that you'll be asked to make. The second section, which is about, we call it the day of the life of a council member. So this is unfortunately some of the legalistic things, but it's actually important for you to have an understanding of some of your expectations and what sort of things that you'll actually be required to do and the bit of the boundaries if you choose to become. And then Susie will finish off with a bit of information about the election process. So hopefully that sort of covers off most of your initial questions and your initial thoughts to actually give you a bit of background and whether you cement your decision whether you're actually going to nominate or not. And obviously we are still open to having questions coming forward through to us, and if we can answer them, we will answer them. Otherwise, we may refer you to the Electoral Commission. So I'll just hand over to Chris, and so Chris can do his bit.
Okay, thank you everybody. Now, I thought I'd just talk about a little bit about Gawler. So you could notice there, we've got a population back in 2024 of just over 27,000. I think it's closer to 28 now. We're growing quite quickly. I think this coming year, we're looking around 2% growth year on year. 192 k's of sealed roads. Interestingly, we've got about, I think, 5 kilometres of dirt roads left, and we're looking to get them sealed progressively over the next 10 years. Rateable properties, 13,000, and an area of 42 square k's, which helps us to some degree in that it's a compact council, but it means the growth that we're feeling becomes more pronounced to each and every one of us. Up on the screen there, you'll see some pillars that are currently in our community plan, and they're just some headings that the council use to guide how they focus their expenditure and activities that they undertake in the community. And then there's some values there, which if you think about a group of people coming together, say a group of elected members, it's probably a good thing to agree on a set of values on how you want to operate together. Now, this is a little slide, and I've grabbed it from our business plan, where notionally it talks about for every $100 of rates, what do we spend on each aspect of council? Now, if you look at, there's eight areas there, and under each of those, you could argue there's probably about 10 discrete services that are below each of those. If you look at infrastructure management, for example, that covers, road maintenance, road reseals, footpaths, curbs, bluestone, stormwater management, a whole lot of components in there, and you can see $40 out of every $100, so a significant part of the rates money goes there. And that theme, I won't go through each one, but you can see that theme running across there. A fairly new one for this council is economic development and tourism. Now it says 60 cents of every $100. What I would point out, this is purely the rates component. So we spend quite a bit more on economic development and tourism, but there's some income that comes in to support that, so we don't have to fund it all from rates. So this is purely talking about what's our rates fund. And just for context, our rate revenue is about $45 million a year. 32, total revenue. 32, that's why Sharon's here. If you think about all those top headings that you can see there, I guess the message I want to share with you is that a day in the life of a councillor can be quite varied. And I've got some pictures up behind me here where we've looked at projects that the current council have delivered through their term. A couple, obviously very topical, was the Pioneer Park Wall. And I'm going to pick that one for a minute to talk about some of the challenges as an incoming councillor. So there's points where you may be asked to consider decisions that some parts of the community might be in favour of, some parts of the community might be against, or there might be decisions where everyone's overwhelmingly in favour, or at times it feels like the whole community are perhaps not in favour of what you're looking to do. I think that example with the wall is probably a good one, that during the process it was quite a difficult decision for the council, to be fair. But if you look at it now, and I'll say from my perspective, I'm not going to speak for everyone, I'd argue, wow, the end result's amazing. And overwhelmingly the community seemed to be quite liking the end result. But if we look at some other projects, so this tennis court redevelopment project, that was a project where we worked with other layers of government, a local tennis club, and we produced this amazing community outcome. What else can I talk about? Revegetation of our waterways there. So we've gone from infrastructure to natural environment, installation of solar panels on our buildings. So at the moment, we're talking about how we reduce our carbon emissions, for example. And we're having conversations about going towards electric vehicles for our fleet. It's not all straight line decisions, but they're things we're starting to turn our mind to as a local government authority that probably don't initially spring to mind when people think about local government. And I guess just before I leave that slide, and I've got to be careful I don't turn this into a budget conversation, because that's for another night, which you're all invited to, by the way. I'd love you to come. This is the great balancing act that the council has. We've got this broad range of services that arguably the community are expecting council to deliver, and then we've got to balance that with the community's ability to pay. So there's this constant challenge, because we need to keep the rates as affordable as we can, but then generally, and it's kind of human nature, we always want more and more services to be provided, and it's that constant balancing act that the elected members have to battle with to make a decision on behalf of the community. Right, current issues. I've just thought I'd talk about 4 things here, and the theme is really about growth. So as a council, we are the northern suburbs of Adelaide carrying most of the growth, and the town of Gawler is right in the middle of that. So if I talk about the Northern Parklands, who's seen the sign and seen some of the media about the Northern Parklands, yeah? This is quite a good project in that I think it actually will create a nice green band between ourselves and Playford. So we keep kind of our distinct identity. It's quite the plan will take so many years to implement, but it's something this council is directly involved in right at the moment. And you know, there will be a master plan shared with the community in the next month or 2, and they'll have an opportunity to give feedback on what's some of the infrastructure and design of that green space. It's going to be about 1,000 hectares of green space, which is in the town of Gawler area, so our residents would directly benefit from that. The Cuddler Structure Plan. So at the time that, well, even as late as when I arrived at council, the GARP was just getting talked about and released. The growth at Cuddler wasn't really on the radar many years before that. We're talking about 16,000 homes going into that area. If you think about that area now, it's largely got a bit of a rural feel to it, 5-acre, 2-acre lots. The face of Cuddler is going to change dramatically. But it's also, if you think about that first population number I shared, 28,000, if you say about 12,000 of those homes will be in Gawler, the rest of the homes will be in Playford. That's essentially a doubling of our population just in Cuddler. Now, it'll take many years, but significant work's already underway. There's a structure plan being worked on by the state government as we speak, and I'm sure they're looking to get housing on that land as soon as possible. Town Centre Structure Plan. Hopefully some of you have seen some media or some work going on around this one. This is where we're looking at our CBD and looking at how we can get that to function in the context of all this growth that's happening. So the council currently, or shortly, will be considering going out to public consultation with what's our town centre look like, what's the traffic flows we're looking to achieve, what are the building heights we're looking to put in place, what type of investments are we looking to encourage in the CBD, how does that all relate to our residential population. I think all with the goal of making sure Gawler keeps a distinct identity and that the town centre actually remains our town centre and doesn't get lost, and we keep that identity regardless of the high levels of growth. And then I'll call it somewhat controversially, because who was aware of the boundary realignment proposal that was put forward. So there was a proposal put forward not that long ago for Concordia to come into the town of Gawler. Ultimately, that didn't succeed. However, we still need to acknowledge the fact that there's a high amount of growth going to happen right on our boundary, and that will impact on the town of Gawler. Now, one of the ways we are having to look at that is what's the transport or the vehicular impacts particularly going to be on Gawler, and they will be significant. So we need to make sure that we're working with the state and federal governments, and I say federal because I want to get some of their money to help fund this. We need to make sure we're doing the work to make sure our Gawler doesn't grind to a halt as a result of all this growth that's on our boundaries. And these are the kind of conversations that you'll be involved in should you run and be successful in your bid to become an elected member of the town of Gawler. So I call this current projects, and this is where I didn't follow my own notes and I digressed and talked about it before I should have. I've got 6 examples up here, and these are actually current examples that are in our current draft budget that's public consultation right now. As I said, a budget chat tonight, but more a sharing of things that are certainly on the radar or are going to be actively considered by an incoming council. So, Gawler Aquatic Centre. We've got this, I'll call it a regional piece of infrastructure because there's no pools like it, even just outside of our boundaries. We're suggesting we invest about $1.3 million in keeping that pool up to spec and operational. But it does provide services to the broader region. There's a question, now this is a difficult one, should other councils be helping us fund that? There's no easy answer to that. Enhancing Town Presentation Program. It's essentially code for, I'm looking to bring on two more outdoor crew to make a 3-person crew, and their focus is on town beautification and presentation, supporting the rest of our teams, but it's really important that we create an amenity in the town of Gawler that is pleasing to our community, and that's what that one's about. Glenelg Lane is just an example. It's about I'll get the figure slightly wrong, but it's about a $700,000 project. And it's an unsealed road. It's one of the roads we want to start resealing so that in the future we're not having to deal with an unsealed road network. I've mentioned the town centre plan. The Aspire Walking Connection, that's a project that's been in the ether for a few years now, and that's about creating a shared youth path from Aspire Estate into Gawler and across Main North Road. That's about a $900,000 project. Now, the Mayor and I are actively trying to get other people's money to help fund that. We think we're going to be somewhat successful. We'd love the whole 900, but we'll take anything we can get at this point. And Finner Street Renewal. This is in a part of the town that's in the Churchill area. And so that will be, the bluestone will be looked after and be resealed. But not inexpensive, that's a $900,000 project. One of the things we're finding as we go forward that there's a lot of cost pressures that are coming to local government. And what sounds exorbitantly expensive to anyone if you had a chat down the pub, once you start breaking down what's actually required, a lot of the work we do, unfortunately, carries a reasonable price tag. It's not to say we don't fight to try and get that down, but some of the numbers we deal with are quite large. I think that's me. Thanks, Sharon.
So thanks, Chris. So we just thought it was actually good to provide a bit of context, just to sort of sit there and give you a bit of an indication on the types of decisions that you actually will be asked to make, because as council members you are the actual decision-making body of the council. But it's also important to understand that councils, we're part of a 3-tier government. We're part of a broader system of government and we can't act independently of the state and federal government from that perspective. And I think it is, and it is a difficult one for the community to understand that, and because communities' expectations actually extend beyond our responsibilities as a council area. So I think if you're coming into running to be a candidate, you need to actually be aware of, to sit there and say, actually, what's within council's remit and versus what's actually within the state and the federal government remit. So, you know, so realistically, from a local government perspective, our focus is actually on the local community, you know, and there is things that, you know, as I said, it's like the local services and the facilities where the state actually provides those state-based services. So it is in health, it's in particularly hospitals, education, policing and emergency services, and where the federal focus is actually on, you know, also a bit of health, but, you know, on the immigration and transport and all that sort of stuff as well. So while you might want to sort of particularly sit there and think, oh, okay, well, I'm going to run for council because I actually want to change the way, like, you know, I'll pick ramping at the hospitals, that isn't actually within the remit of council as a day-to-day responsibility. However, as Chris said, you know, with some of the projects, we actually do need to work with state governments, and that's where we actually have this a degree of influence, but it is limited, you know, so it's not like we advocate. So, you know, we can have establishing those strong relationships between the state and federal representatives actually help us achieve those better outcomes. So that's one of the key things about, you know, we might not agree with them, but we need to, as a council, also work with them. And so, like, for example, with the state government, you know, we have done through the GARP and that collaborated quite strongly on growth, you know, to sit there and say, okay, well, and to advocate Gawler's position. So that's what we actually do as a council, and that's what you would do as a council member as well. And then from a federal government perspective, I think most of the relationship that we actually have with them is in that funding space. You know, federal government does provide financial assistance grants, which comes from this collection of those national taxes like GST and fuel excise, you know, so some of that money does come back to us as local government through assistance grants, but then we actually also have that relationship with federal government through applying for funds for local projects, for example, the Aspire Walking Connection. And, you know, the Mayor and the CEO every year goes off to ALGA, where we advocate for local issues with the federal government as well. So, so we just wanted to make sure that realistically, like, there might be some things that you think, oh, well, I'll come onto council and I can change. You just need to be conscious of the fact that the remit of local government is actually within those local issues, and our influence on those other broader issues tend to be more in advocacy roles rather than actually direct change. So from a council perspective, we actually deliver a combination of legislatively required services and essential infrastructure, and then we actually have a couple of, and then we have a set of discretionary functions. So some of those legislative functions is to sit there and say, under the Act, we have a responsibility to actually work with state and federal government policy. We do have a lot of regional advisory groups as well. So we provide facilities that benefit the area. So under the Act, under various legislations like either the Local Government Act, the Planning Act, the Health Act, the Dog and Cat Management Act, the Roads Act, you know, and we are required to maintain our local roads, streets, footpaths that are under our care. It does get a bit confusing because even within our council area, there are some roads that aren't under our care. They're the responsibility of state government, or they may be the responsibility of federal government as well. So, you know, and then we do have a legislative responsibility to provide parks, reserves, public facilities, hard waste collection. And then we have the whole heap of discretionary functions which are driven from community expectations, like in providing libraries and the recreation and sporting facilities, swimming pools and all that sort of stuff. So there is that distinction between things that we have to do. We have to do a certain amount of things. So you might not agree why we do, why we may do something. It's probably, we do it probably because we have to actually do it under the Act. And this is a bit of the, I suppose, the pressure of local government from a state government perspective, is to sit there and say that you actually find over the years there's been a bit of cost shifting, to sit there and say, so state government actually does some legislative changes which transfers the responsibility of what they were previously responsible to local governments or to councils, and we may not agree with it, but unfortunately sometimes we're still, we just have to deal with it. So, but it is just important to understand that from that perspective, there's things that we have to do and there's things that we like to do. So just in relation to the council area, so this is actually our 42 square kilometres. So as a council, we have 11 members that are elected by voters. So the principal mayor, which is the principal member, which is the mayor, so that is actually an elected representative, and then we actually have 10 area councils. So as an area council, you represent the whole area of the town of Gawler. This is unlike some other council areas that have wards. So if you actually in a council area, say for example like Playford, they actually have a ward structure. So people that run for council, they run in a ward, they're elected by their ward members, and even though that they're still supposed to represent the community as a whole, it tends to sit there and say that they'll actually look after their constituents. As an area council, you will be responsible for the whole area, irrespective of where you live or where you, from that perspective. From the 1st of July, as a result of the boundary realignment, there is going to be a boundary change, which isn't reflected in this map. So we will actually have a net increase of around 33 properties. Most of these are actually coming from transfers from the city of Playford. So we've got 60 properties transferring in from Playford around the Gawler, around the Everston Park and Hillier area, but we also have 31 along the Eulaby and Bibaringa, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, which is actually going to transfer to Playford, and then we've got a couple properties that are actually coming in from Light Regional Council around the Reed area, and a couple from Barossa up in the Gawler East. So just thought I'd let you know that, so the boundaries have changed to an extent, and that actually comes into account on the 1st of July. So the mayor. So the mayor is the principal member of council and is elected to provide that civil leadership to the council and guide the work of the elected body as council. So and the role of the mayor works with the CEO to actually ensure that the council decisions are actioned. So even though, so the mayor does have that leadership role, but it still actually needs to actually operate within the collective decision-making framework that all council members are actually working within. So as from a civic leadership, they're the spokesperson of the council. They're the the spokesperson that normally promotes the community and the council regionally, and then they foster those relationships. They chair the council meeting, so they're the presiding member, and so they facilitate the council meeting to make sure that there's respectful debate in the decision making, making sure that the council meetings are run within the legislative framework and our meeting procedures, and making sure that they actually encourage councillors to actually participate in the debate. So there's actually, everyone actually has a fair go. The important things that you need to know as well, if you're considering running for mayor, is decisions are made collectively by the council in council meetings only. So that is your decision-making vehicle. And interestingly, the mayor does not have a deliberative vote in any of those decisions unless it's a casting vote. So that role in the meeting as a mayor is to actually facilitate the discussion and make sure that the council, when they make the decisions, are lawful and within the realms of the Act and any meeting procedures. So obviously they're there to provide that leadership role with the elected body, so making sure that the elected body is working well together, and assist councillors to work collectively and represent. They're the representative of. Is that just no? That's not good enough. Again, they also may participate in regional or local groups. For example, Mayor's just been elected onto Garrock, so some of the industry peak groups, so they also may participate in those sorts of things as well. So as a councillor, I just want to, there is a slight distinction in terminology. So anyone that is elected, whether they're the mayor or a councillor, they're a council member. But if you're actually going if you're not the mayor, you're referred to as a councillor. It's a bit of a nuance, but that's why the terminology is actually changed. So you're there to represent the interests of the community, and making sure that, I suppose, so you're the vehicle for the community to be able to shape their local community, and ask that and make those decisions. Obviously, it provides you an opportunity to provide positively for your community. It's a rewarding and challenging role, I'm sure. I haven't run as a council member, but or a councillor. But again, it also requires commitment, responsibility and accountability. I think that you can't underestimate how much of a commitment it is for you to actually, if you want to become a councillor. So your role, your key responsibilities are to represent the community. And again, I'll just reinforce this, you're representing the community, even though you might be elected by a small group of the community in the people that vote for you. When you actually become on council and you become a council member, you're actually, or a councillor, you actually need to make sure that you're representing the interests and the aspirations of the whole community, not just individuals or individual groups or individual areas. You need to listen to community concerns and feedback. You need to advocate for your local priorities and local needs, and so some of that advocacy is with local government, state government and federal government. And also one of the key roles is to explain the decisions and the policies that the council make as a collective group back to that community. So, you know, you need to understand, one of the things is to sit there and say, that doesn't mean you have to agree with it. You know, so I would sit there and say that, you know, not all decisions of councils get unanimously carried. Like, so not everyone, it doesn't need to be that. But even if you don't agree with the decision, you didn't vote for the decision, because it's a decision of the collective council, you need to support that decision when you actually speak about it in the public, because it was collectively, irrespective of whether you voted for it or not. So obviously you participate in the decision making, you attend council and committee meetings. So essentially all council meetings are essentially mandatory because that, as I said, that is actually the decision making vehicle for council to do the things that they actually need to do. If you're on committees, you need to attend the committee members. Obviously, as you're the key decision maker, you need to spend the time to actually read your agendas, read your reports, so you can actually make sure that you make informed decisions. You need to debate issues constructively. You need to vote on motions. So it is so essentially, once you're in the chamber, if you're in the chamber, you need to vote. You cannot abstain from voting once you're in the chamber. So once you're in the council meeting, you need to vote. So it is that you either vote for or against. You can't choose to abstain from voting. And again, you're making the decisions for the best interest of the community as a whole. What is actually going to increase the well-being of the town of Gawler collectively, rather than, and unfortunately in all situations and all decisions, there's going to be some winners and some losers and some people sitting in the middle. You just need, when you're actually making those decisions, you need to balance that up and making sure what is the best for the community as a whole. You shape our strategic direction because obviously that's through the community plan, through our asset management plans, through our annual business plan, through long-term financial plan. And you're there to ensure good governance. So the other key person is Chris, the CEO. Chris is the actual only staff member that the council employs. So he has the fortunate position of having 11 bosses collectively. So, however, and so Chris's role is within the delegation and the strategic direction of the council. So being guided by the community plan and all the other strategic plans that the council adopts. He manages the day-to-day operations of the organisation. He's the one that implements the decisions of council along with senior staff and other staff, and he leads the staff and the operational delivery. Obviously, as an elected body, while you're setting the direction and making the decisions of the council, you do actually have a high reliance on Chris and the staff providing you the professional advice to help you make those decisions. So we will, as staff, we will be the ones that does the research and deal with the issues and present the issues and present the options for you to actually make a decision. So he needs to make sure that they acts within the law, and again, he also represents council's interest and with other councils, with state and federal governments and other peak bodies. So the council decides what to do, the CEO takes the action to actually make sure it happens. And realistically, the basic role of the CEO is the Act. So, you know, there is a legislative thing. So it's important for candidates to understand that, you know, you don't manage the day-to-day operations of the council. You don't have that role other than Chris, you can't direct staff individually, and you don't actually become involved in those operational staff complaints or any of that sort of stuff. So those issues are actually dealt with by Chris. So just excuse me and I'll pick. This is actually from the LGA slide deck. So this is actually just a good slide that sort of brings it in together as to sit there and say that relationship between, I suppose, the mayor, the council members and the elected body. So you, on that side, you're responsible for like the strategy, the policy, the governance and the representation. Sorry. Whereas the CEO on the administration side is responsible for, I I suppose, those operational aspects and implementing the decisions and that are actually made by the council. So yeah.
Can I just quickly say, there's an important little piece there though, and it's that crossover piece. And whilst the two are kind of distinct, we really do need to work together to get the results. And I think for me, that's the important bit in the centre there.
Yep.
It shows the interplay between the two.
So this is just sort of giving you a bit of an idea about, again, sort of like just reinforcing about the fact that the decision-making process. So obviously the community elects the council members that become on the council, they actually make the decisions of the council, the CEO implements it along with staff. And some of the strategic directions are actually outlined in the Gawler Community Plan, our asset management plans, our long-term financial plans. We have a whole series of functional strategies and plans as well that guide our decision-making or guide the direction, and then the annual business plan. I think the important thing is to sit there and say that that decision-making, it's actually only through a council meeting. And all that sort of stuff. So outside a council meeting, there is no decisions actually made of council. So what does it mean if you become a council member? What would you actually be doing on a daily basis? So what are the things that you're actually participating in? So council and committee meetings. We have an ordinary council meeting at once a month. We're required to have an ordinary council meeting once a month by legislation. We are also required to have a few committees. We're required to have an audit committee. We're required to have a CAP. And then as council, we can actually decide to actually have other committees as well. So those sorts of decisions are actually up to council. And you as a council member can choose whether you want to be on those committees or not. So it's not necessarily mandatory. That's where there is some discretion whether you participate in those committees or not. So obviously with every meeting, so you can actually make an informed decision. There is reading of the agendas and reports, and a lot of other informal communications that we actually do send council members. So we do have a weekly communique, which is probably a bit more of an information sharing, that just issues that are actually happening within a council, in the council area. From that perspective, so we have workshops and briefings. Obviously there's community events that you may be invited to from a community groups that you will participate in engagement. There's training. The first year from a training perspective is pretty full on because we do actually have to deliver a mandatory training program. So we have to do that within the first 2 months, and then we have to actually do a refresher. Personally, which I think is a bit too early, too soon after the first mandatory session, within a term, I think the second year. So I think it probably should be pushed out to the third year, but and then you'd just be responding to like the community. You know, they'll have inquiries that they might send you through email. They might ask you face to face walking down the street. They might give you a ring. You know, and then also just general things that, you know, there might be something on that comes through the meeting agenda that you might actually just want to get a viewpoint of the community before you actually come in. If it's a particular contentious issue, or if you actually don't know if it's something that the community wants, so you might actually do that engagement. So depending on the role, like I suppose depending on the complexity, and as Chris showed before, there's probably a lot of good things happening in Gawler coming up, but there are a lot of big things that is actually increasing the complexity of Gawler as a council area, but also as council and decisions that are actually going to come come before you if you are actually elected. So they are quite complex. So it depends on, that timing commitment. We can't sort of sit there and say categorically you're going to spend, 20 hours a month on council business. We just don't know. But you just need to know that there is probably a big commitment that's actually required of you. But generally, you can expect to have at least one meeting a week. We have our meetings on Tuesday, so it will either be a council meeting, a committee meeting, or an information briefing session. So normally, I know that I do as a staff member sit there and say, actually, Tuesday night, don't ask me to do anything on a Tuesday night because I'll probably be here. So that's the sort of the commitment as a minimum, I would sit there and say, but then there's extra things that may happen as we go through.
I might just jump in. Don't be off-put by saying that we can't do Tuesdays.
Oh, yeah.
When the new council comes together, the new council will decide what works for them. Tuesday works for the current council, and so all of our lives are now based around Tuesday nights. A new council might say it's Mondays or it's Wednesdays. That's absolutely a conversation for the new council to set and determine that. I saw an extreme example of where it was in a rural council where the new council came together and one of the constituents said, well, there's just no physical way I can make a Tuesday night, for example. And the council said, oh, sorry, didn't realise that. Let's change our night. So just want to put that context on it.
Yep.
Thanks.
And previous council I worked for, the council used to meet on a Monday night. So is at our discretion, that's correct. So we did just provide just a bit of information in relation to that. So we do have the statutory committees, so the Audit and Risk and the Council Assessment Panel. There is a independent representation on that. So again, the number of councillor members over the reform has actually decreased. So currently we have 2 council members and 3 independents on our audit committee. But however, with the council assessment panel, there's actually only 1 council member. Cool. And then we have a CEO performance management panel, which is made up of council members. And then we actually have a series of discretionary committees. And again, those discretionary committees are a decision for the council. These are the ones that we actually have at this point in time. And again, at the first meeting, if you are successful, that's one of the it is quite unfortunate, the first meeting that you have, you're new, you don't have any idea, and you're just going to get bombarded with should I have this, should I have not, and all that sort of stuff as well. So can I just jump in there, Sharon? Council Assessment Panel, just for those that may not know what that stands for, it's a planning assessment panel, and it's designed where if our planners internally can't make a decision on a matter for whatever reason, it gets considered by this independent planning panel, just in case anyone wasn't sure what that meant. Thanks. Yeah. And this is, we've just set the timeline. So under the Act, we have to give you 3 clear days for the agenda. We try and do that for a 4th. So we try and get the agenda out normally distributed on a Thursday. There may be some circumstances that it's not going to come on a Thursday, depending on the matter, or there might be something contentious that we're waiting on something, but generally it will be a Thursday, and essentially depending on the meeting. And I think that, it is, and I suppose if you are successful and that consideration of what the day is, and that's one of the things that you need to consider, is to sit there and say, actually, what's the best day to give me the time that I actually need to read the agenda, because, as I said, this is the formal decision-making vehicle, so you need to actually make sure that you're coming to those council meetings informed as you can be. So you need to make sure that you've read the agenda, understood the agenda reports, and some of them can be quite detailed. And I admit, like, I'm an accountant, whenever a planning one comes in, it's just, some of the stuff in there, it's quite heavy. So you need to actually be prepared for that. You can ask questions, though, of the CEO or senior staff before coming to the meeting, right? So if you have a question, you want a point of clarification, or you think you're going to ask a question because you want something clarified, I know from our preference, from a staff perspective, if you could ask that question, give us a bit of a heads up of that question so we can actually become prepared, because you might need to make that decision there on the night. And if you ask a question and we don't actually have the information to give you because it's a bit more complex than us responding off the top of our head, it actually also gives the opportunity for you to actually make that decision and make him feel as though you're making an informed decision as well.
If I can just add there, Sharon, I guess I see my job is to make sure you've got all the facts, the figures, the data to make any decision that you need to make. Whilst you'll make the decision at the council meeting, it's not uncommon where for more complex items, we might have had a briefing session a week or two.
Stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry, Sharon. I'll just keep going for a minute. Where we would have had a more of an informal conversation about it, and so you kind of have it in your mind, and we would have worked it through. Wouldn't have made the decision, but we would have shared and had some conversations around it. So all the information is not always going to be coming kind of in that short time frame. Sorry.
That was my next slide. As when I say I expect a meeting pretty much every week, like once every week, this is because we actually do have these information sessions. And so that is actually allowed. So the information sessions are either facilitated by staff or executive managers or, the CEO, executive managers or staff. We might actually also have a consultant come in if it's quite a complex matter and they're doing work to present a report. Recently, we just had one on the structure plan, so we had the consultants come and present that information. And these are informal, so the structure and the meeting procedure rules don't apply to these meetings. So you'll find that the council meetings are quite formal and quite structured, and for someone that's coming in, I know that when I first came into local government, I was sort of overwhelmed as a staff member, the level of structure and formality of a council meeting. Information sessions don't have that. The idea is to basically share information, get feedback, and give us a bit more opportunity to share some complex ideas or just get some feedback. They're not mandatory, but because information sessions normally are a precursor to to information that's actually coming back to council, they are strongly recommended that you actually attend, because it is that opportunity for you to ask more questions and to get a different context. It's a bit more relaxed. If we see that council members as staff, if we see that council members aren't necessarily understanding, we can add extra context, which we're limited to do in a council meeting. So it is an information flow, and as Chris said, it is not a decision-making vehicle. So no decisions are made, but it is just that opportunity for members to actually ask questions, seek clarification, and us to actually give a bit more detail, or a bit more context, so we don't have to give you a 50-page report, because we've actually given you the context in the information session, so we can actually just talk about the issues. Public can observe, so they are, obvious. So under the Act, the first instance is information sessions have to be open to the public. However, there may be some circumstances if the confidentiality provisions are met by the subject matter, the CEO can determine to have that as a confidential or a closed session. So that's what we actually talk, and these can be very effective to actually share that information. Sorry, I'm getting there. Just a bit of responsibilities. So you are required to comply by the behaviour standards. You have to declare conflicts of interest when a decision comes to council and you have a conflict. Again, this is a very difficult thing for council members to understand whether they do have a conflict or don't have a conflict. That's where we would sit there and say, actually, make sure that you actually reach out to either myself, Chris, or Susie as governance, so you can actually talk through that issue, so you can actually understand whether you have a conflict, whether you have a general conflict, whether you have material conflict, and all that sort of stuff as well. You will be given confidential information. So obviously anything that's in the public, like considered publicly at information sessions, and that is okay to share, but you may actually have some confidential information provided to you either through a confidential meeting, through a confidential briefing, or even some confidential correspondence that we actually send to you through our internal channels. So you have to maintain that confidentiality. We've talked about mandatory training. You have to declare gifts and benefits, and essentially, you know, there is a requirement that you attend council meetings, information sessions, even though they're not mandatory, highly recommended. And then if you're a committee member, you need to attend those. Just to finalise, you know, because you sort of sit there and say, that seems a lot of work for that. So as a council member, you do get an allowance. The allowance is actually set by the Remuneration Tribunal of South Australia. They normally issue their determination each year around November. So leading up to this, they'll indicate what the new base allowance is. So we do have a base allowance for our council. It's $21,000. So as a council member, that's what you would actually receive as an allowance. That is an allowance. So from that perspective, if you choose to run for mayor and you're elected as mayor, you will get an allowance of 4 times that. If councils don't have to have a deputy mayor, so that's another decision of the council on their first meeting as to whether they have a deputy mayor or they run without a deputy mayor, and then if the mayor's not available, they just appoint a council member at that point in time. And that if councils do choose to do appoint a deputy mayor, the deputy mayor will get 1.25 allowance. And just as a council member, you are a public person, so there is going to be some information about you that is actually going to be published on the website. So each year you have to do a register of interest. That will actually be on the council website. Your benefits and allowances will actually be on the council website. If you receive a gift, you have to declare that information will be on the council website. You know, so we have a legislative requirement to do that. So information will be out there about you from that perspective. So just get Susie to finish off with just some quick stuff about the election process, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Aaron. And I had a situation where I was a councillor for the Barossa Council for a term, elected in 2010, where I was in a doctor's waiting room and a resident came up and asked a query. So you are very accessible to the community, and particularly once you are elected and get your face known out there as a councillor and your name, you can be asked questions at potentially moments where you wouldn't envisage you may have that. I think it was about a footpath issue from memory, but I was feeling crook in the doctor's waiting office, so I can't quite recollect that, but that you are accessible and contactable, and you can be approached at different times. So that's an example from my experience. Moving on to now you've had all the information, you've gone, okay, I'm willing to stick my hand up and represent the community. I want to see the area manage this growth moving forward and being the best it can be. The election process. So The Electoral Commission actually is responsible for the administration of the elections process. So they manage the candidate nominations process. They manage the merging of the roles to get the voters' roll. So council have some responsibilities in managing the supplementary roll, which is the people who are not on the House of Assembly roll for the state elections. There are other voting entitlements that people who own property and businesses are able to enrol to be on that supplementary roll. So council staff have a element in the voters' roll compilation. The mail out of voting of ballot packs, it is not a compulsory election like the other two tiers of government. It is a voluntary to vote in council elections, and it is done by postal ballot. So the Electoral Commission are responsible for the printing and distribution of those materials. The voting, again, in terms of the submission back of those voting papers, if there was any issues with the ballot papers that have been received by a resident or a voter in that election, EXA is the body that would deal with those issues. If there's someone who's received the wrong, for example, in a ward council, which was my previous council experience prior to coming to the town of Gawler, someone may have got the wrong ward's ballot papers. So they might be in Ward 3 and for some reason they've received Ward 5. It would be the Electoral Commission as the authority for managing that election process that would deal with those. The scrutiny and counter votes and the declaration of results once the count is done. Now, I understand previously there's been some miscommunication or not great communications during this process at the town of Gawler. Scrutiny and counter votes is something, especially if there's a lot of candidates, everyone's eager to learn the result, and unfortunately it takes time, and often, as we've seen, where the Electoral Commission may determine there's a complex count, so there might be 10 positions, but there might be 20, 30 councillors, so it's got quite complex when you get down to working out where preferences of votes go. That's where the Electoral Commission will actually take those ballot papers and take them off-site and back to use their electronic count software to do that count. It becomes too complex to do it by hand. And I don't know, you may have had a chance to be a scrutineer and observe a count for whether it's not local government, state or federal, and it can be a very, very long day or multiple days. And so if there is that complexity with the number of candidates for the number of positions available and votes cast, you know, there's a very good return rate compared to some other councils for participating in a vote. I've worked for the council that I think was down the bottom of the votes that were actually submitted. So part of council's role in an election process is to actually encourage that voter participation, promote that the elections are happening. And because it is voluntary, we don't have the, I guess, a luxury of everyone being mandated to submit their votes. So part of our legislative role as a council is to make sure we're holding sessions like this tonight, make sure we're promoting the Electoral Commission and Local Government Association have a joint website which will promote on the latter slides. But we don't run the election, so to save a lot of time on for everyone, I thought it'd be good to cover off, and these are questions that I've either taken inquiries about when I've been employed by a council or potentially when I was running and I didn't know where to go, I would mistakenly ask a council staff member. So because we're not running the election, if there is questions about the process that aren't sort of the real nitty-gritty about what the timeframes that EXA might be working to for a scrutiny and count. Generally, the mayoral count is always undertaken first. However, I know at a previous election, not the last one, there was some unrest because the way a letter was worded to, when I was at the City of Playford, the people who had nominated for councillor positions, not the mayor, it wasn't clear that that wasn't being undertaken sort of concurrently at the same time, so they were a bit disgruntled. Again, there's not much as a council staff member we can do about their process. Timeframes, we're not responsible, I guess, for setting the rules. The Electoral Commission works within the boundaries of the legislation as well. So if you've got complaints or queries about authorising any advertisements, any campaign or electoral material, social media posts, if you're not sure about signage, regulations, I mean, council do administer some stuff in that space through our regulatory services team. However, the rules as they're set in the state-based legislation, you won't see a lot of call flutes these days, as they're not permitted to be on public roads, etc. Private property is not a matter for council. If you've got a friend who's fully supportive of your campaign and they're happy to have your face and promotion on their private residence, then that's their decision. But on our public roads, etc., the rules have changed more than previous times. Any complaints that are related to the management of the elections process, or I guess we don't like to think there's going to be candidates who someone might want to lodge a complaint for whatever reason. They don't have anything to do with us at council. They're all to go through to the Electoral Commission. The role we have in promoting the election is actually legislated in the Elections Act, and so we are responsible for providing information. We're responsible for education and publicity around the elections, you know, in the lead up to. Part of our role is to promote public participation. So that's in all the three aspects in terms of we want people to enrol to vote to vote. We want people to consider running and sticking up their hand, to get a diverse range of people on council to represent the community and the community interests. And then we also have a new part of the legislated role we have is to hold a public meeting. So once nominations have closed, and that idea is we will hold a public meeting where candidates who have nominated and they've gone through that process, nominations have closed, or unless there is a position of council for reasons that they're not going to hold a meeting, then we must, under the Act, hold a public meeting so members of the public can come in, hear from their candidates and be informed. So that's a facilitated role. It's not that council will do more than facilitate for that session, and candidates it's up to them whether they attend. It's just the Act has now legislated that is something that councils will do. As well as local promotion and to get participation in all aspects as high as it can possibly be. The LGA runs the Local Government Association, run a statewide marketing campaign, and from about late March, encouraging people from all backgrounds to consider standing and highlighting the important role of elected members to their community. So that also then goes into participate in the vote. So Electoral Commission are for all of those more formal management process matters of the election, and council, we just help to promote and say, nominate can be part of this grassroots level tier of government. I had a good experience, and I'm sure if you're thinking of nominating, talk to some people who may have been former members in your community or currently, and you can talk to them about what their experience is to get that first-hand view. Check you're eligible to nominate. I think it would be fairly crucial to make sure before you indicate, even though we're not up to nominations being open yet, that you are eligible, because it would be not a great thing to have to say publicly declare, yep, I'm going to run for council, I'm going to stand as a candidate, and then you get to nominating and you find out for whatever reason you actually can't. So Australian citizen, 18 years of older, you're on the House of Assembly roll, They're the sort criteria. We've got more information on our page, and I note that the EXA will be releasing a full nominations kit very soon. It's not available. I checked as late as I could leave it this afternoon, but closer to nominations actually opening, I think that will be a place where you can go. And that kit will provide a council elections booklet, which is the one resource that you can access now, which is quite good. I think it's very much improved on previous elections with the information it's got in there. Very practical information provided about all phases from considering nominating to through the process, and then once you're nominated, what then? It's got some good insight in there. So there will still be some information about the requirements for a candidate profile and what you need to submit as part of your nomination that will make up that full nominations kit, but the link's just not. It just is coming soon. Likewise, about checking your eligibility, you want to make sure that you're aware of the key dates. There would be nothing worse than wanting to nominate. You've come to one of these sessions, you've read all the materials online, you're like, yep, I'm going to get ready to nominate, and then you miss a key date. So please make sure that don't leave it to the last minute. It is an online nomination, so you don't want to risk any technology sort of issues that can come up. We know that technology is not foolproof. It's not 100% for anyone. So make sure you leave a good time before they close again open on the 25th of August and then close on the 8th of September. Part of your nomination will be to write a short profile about yourself or what you're standing for. That will go out when the ballots are mailed out, and you'll have a little photo, and then it has a little profile about yourself. My recommendation as someone who's been through that process and reread their profile statement afterwards is take your time and don't leave that to the end as well. Like, make sure you've considered what you would like people to know if they're having a considered look at all of the list of names and the profiles of what people are standing for, what they've written about themselves. The Electoral Commission will organise the mail out to eligible voters, and that happens over a period. And then the close of voting is on Wednesday, the 11th of November at 5 p.m. So they're just some key dates, but if you're considering nominating, just make sure you leave yourself enough time prior to the nomination close. One thing that will happen is as the nomination period once it's open and as it continues, the Electoral Commission will update their website daily with nominations as they come in. What did I do? There we go. So more information and resources, and there's still more that haven't yet been uploaded. So there is a council elections page, can be accessed by QR code or your www.councilelections.sa.gov.au. Some good, as I said, the booklet, I think there's some very practical examples and talks you through the process from campaigning to, thinking about nominating, which I think we've covered off a little bit here, the role of a council member and the role between how the council as the elected body works with the administration under the leadership of the CEO. Covers off on a lot of those things we've touched on this evening, and also starts to talk about campaigning. What are you going to put out there? You've decided to nominate, you've nominated. So it's a great way, obviously, to get your message out. Social media is a very cheap and common way that people can build their profiles, but some people also use printed materials. They might do door knocking. One of the things is key to remember, and I think it's important I mention it even though we're not yet to that nominate phase, because people do publicise that they're going to nominate as a candidate prior to nominations opening, is to just make sure that you authorise your campaign materials, and if you're not sure how to do that, you can look at the website that the LGA and EXA have both contributed to. Don't include any misleading information, because publishing false or misleading information about a candidate, or the election process is prohibited. And this includes using any the council logo of the council that you might be running for or other council images. Also consider just copyright can come into play with different photos that might not be a council logo. And I would also check if I was using any images in any of my marketing material or collateral, I would always make sure if it wasn't just an image that had myself, it was, someone who was more happy to be in a brochure if I did a brochure, or on a social media post that if I was running for council. So just be aware of those sorts of things when you do, if you do nominate and you decide to run, or if you're already saying, yep, I'm going to stand once nominations open, just keep in front of mind some of the things you need to be aware of about requirements in relation to electoral material. So they've got some free online modules now. I haven't undertaken them, I think, but definitely log on, have a look at what the resources are. I think they're around 10 to 20 minutes, each of the 5 different modules. So if you're wanting some more information, go onto that website and register. And thanks to Donna and Tori in the marketing area, they've created a really good resource on our page about information to enrol, nominate, vote. Again, some of the nuances that may be for Town of Gawler. The rest of the stuff is just providing an area on our website that people can go for information. Website or Your Voice? One of the two, yep. Your Voice, yes. And so that's another resource you can have a look at there. And now I'll hand over to our CEO, Chris, and he can take some questions if you've got any, and Sharon as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. We've just shared an immense amount of information with you all. Any questions floating around burning? Yep, jump in, mate. Oh, sorry, microphone's coming.
Just 2 questions. In regards to the council guidelines, how often do they change and are they reviewed regularly? But the other thing I would like to know is, with the emergence of Cudler coming forth, due to the exponential growth that's going to take place because of that, we will see that the council potentially expand and take on more elected members as well.
It's a $1 million question. Don't know the answer to that one. I suspect not. I know there's councils with kind of considerably larger populations than we've got that are still operating with 10 or sometimes slightly less. So I wouldn't expect it. It's when you kind of get to the 100 plus, you start becoming like an Onkaparinga. So I don't expect so. Just your first question. I just wanted to clarify what that one was.
Yeah, so how often are the council guidelines as in reviewed in terms of
The boundary review, it was actually a voluntary process. So the council of the day decided to seek out a boundary expansion opportunity. So the government at this stage isn't mandating or requiring anything of the council, so it would be a voluntary thing should the council of the day decide to pursue it. Yeah.
I'll just add another thing in relation to representation. So, for example, Playford currently has 16 members. The state government has pretty much set a cap on how many, the maximum number of councillors that a council area should have, and that is actually 12. So this, in this election for Playford, they have to actually lose 4 councillors. And what we actually do as well, under the legislation, we actually have to do a representation review. I think our next representation review is actually done in 2029, I think, around that. And that's where we actually look at how we actually are represented as a council. So, you know, at the moment we actually do area councils, and when we actually undertake that representation review, we may make a decision that we've grown that much that we're actually a ward structure might actually be more beneficial to us as well. But I think under the legislation, it's pretty much capped at 12, irrespective of the size of the council area. And that's come through from a local, like a legislative requirement.
Any other questions floating around the room? No, that must have mean we've covered everything. No, can I just say, I know we've covered, as I said, an immense amount of material. The thing I want you to leave with here tonight, if nothing else, is that I guess my job is to create a supportive environment when you get elected. Don't for a minute feel intimidated that you need to know it all or you need to be the font of all knowledge. There is so much support that will be provided when you come on board. So please don't make that one of the reasons why you choose to not run. The only other the only other nuance I would just encourage you to think about, every now and again I would come across a candidate who had, say, one burning issue they wanted to solve in the community, and I don't know if I can pick an example here, but say you had one issue and you wanted to get some new tennis courts in the town. The way I ask people to think about that is, think about if you solved that issue in the first meeting and the council said, right, we're going to resolve to put the tennis courts in. You've got another 4 years. Have a think broadly about what your focuses are likely to be or want to be, rather than just one specific. That'll be a little bit of advice. But again, I encourage anyone who's interested to stand and put your hand up and be part of the process. Cody.
Just further to what Chris says, you don't have to be an expert on everything to be on the council. You can rely on staff, you can also rely on other councillors. You're there to bring your own perspective. But for example, on this council, our mayor is also a carpenter. And so when it comes to a construction thing and like, is this a good quote or are they ripping us off on council prices? We can go to the mayor and say, what do you think on your personal perspective? And so you don't need to, because you'll go from, in one meeting, go from library services to stormwater management to whatever, and you can't personally be an expert on everything. So just thought I should add that.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just got a question over this side.
So with the mandatory training, how many hours do you need to put into that over how long of a time?
Shannon will know the details better than I do.
So it depends. So normally, so there's some sessions. So it depends on how we actually structure it. So sometimes, like say for example, the financial management, there might be 2 modules that are quite related to each other. So we might recommend that essentially you do those 2 modules, and we actually might. Last year there was a couple that we actually scheduled for a Saturday morning, because I can tell you, after a full day of work, if you're still working, coming to sit down and listening to something for 3 to 4 hours is not necessarily effective. So there are some quite meaty modules that we have to do. And it is quite interesting in the sense that you have to actually do these pretty much straight away. But if you're new to council, you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know. I question how effective some of the modules are, whereas my thought is maybe it's better to actually sort of let you have a few months, go to a few council meetings and all that sort of stuff before we actually get into that mandatory training. So we do try and spread it over the 12 months, so we don't sort of just cram it all in. And realistically, it depends on the topic. And unfortunately, we don't have much control because the LGA determine what the content is as well, which is...
I think the one thing I would want you to leave here tonight with, though, is that there will be a schedule proposed, but just like the council meeting day, it'll be for the chamber to say that's going to work for us or that's not going to work for us. And so there is flexibility around, for example, if you can't make a session, I've done it in the past, we have the ability to run special sessions for people that can't make a certain time. So there's lots of provisions where we work with people to fit it in with their lives, rather than make people change their lives to cram it in, if that makes any sense.
And just to add to that, so actually also some of them, if you can't, like ideally, because we try and, like it's mandatory training, but we try and make it relating to Gawler and the council areas. So it is probably better that as a collective group you actually participate. But again, LGA also run other sessions that may be online and all that sort of stuff if you can't make it to those sessions. So it's not that they, yes, so there are lots of opportunities for that as well. So, but...
I know you said the Tuesday night meetings are mandatory, right? Is it one a month?
So, so there's one council meeting a month that's
yeah.
mandatory.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just say like that was the day that, you know, you fell sick or your kid is sick or you're on holiday or like...
So, yeah, absolutely. So in the legislation, it's prescribed that you can actually miss 3 council meetings in a row. If you miss 3 in a row, the council can move a motion to seek to have you removed.
That's only if you don't have apologised.
Sorry, and yet you
So,
haven't
so
applied
you
apology.
can be an apology as well. So,
But it is absolutely normal to not be able to attend all council meetings. It's encouraged, obviously. But if you can't, there's lots of other mechanisms. One, you can talk to your fellow councillors. If you've got some thoughts you want to get shared in the chamber, the minutes will obviously come out, so you'll be able to bring yourself back up to speed with what decisions were made, but also because we live stream, you'll have the ability to review the meeting. Yeah. But highly cognizant that we've all got lives and things happen.
and also there's an option to, like, you know, if you are going on an extended period for leave for various reasons, you can actually ask for a leave of absence as well. So you can ask your council, and then council give you leave not to actually be there. So I think it's mandatory that we have a council meeting, and there are restrictions. I suppose it's one of those things is that you do get paid an allowance. You don't get elected and say, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to come to any council meetings and all that sort of stuff. So it is probably a bit more of a, that thing about the fact of the expectation is that you come to those meetings unless for valid reasons. It is acceptable not to come.
Any other questions? Can I ask for a bit of feedback just before you walk out the door and enjoy the opera that's behind us? Because we're going to run a second session in months.
In July.
How did you find tonight? Man, be honest, I need some feedback.
Do you want me to say all that?
Oh, no, that's right.
No.
No, it actually, based on your feedback you're about to give me, will be fairly similar. I think that's the intention, isn't it?
So essentially we're running 2 sessions. So it is that thing about the fact, because we know that some people already know whether they're thinking about it, and then other people might not know from whether they actually want to, and then they might have a last minute decision that they actually want to nominate. So I suppose, the content of the information, because I don't necessarily know what more we can share other than getting into the nitty-gritty of what's going to happen at the first meeting, and like a lot of the stuff that's probably not necessarily relevant. It's more relevant once you get on. So the intent was very similar. Obviously, everything that you do, you learn from, but pretty much it is the same-ish.
I guess maybe that is my question to you. Was there something that you thought was going to be covered this evening that you haven't heard? No?
So for me, I understand most of this, but what I don't understand is when it comes time to nominate, how do I nominate? Who do I tell? What's that process?
Yeah, I think that's where those couple of websites that Susie shared, and we can make sure you have those links. The EXA are very good at showing a very stepped process, and that will show you in pretty fine detail about the exact steps you need to do. We can make sure you've got those links before you leave tonight.
So one of the things as well is what we will try and do as well. So like we're using Your Voice. So that also gives an opportunity if there's some questions that you just want to know where do I go to and what I need to do. That's also a vehicle that will actually utilise that as a vehicle for you an opportunity for you to ask questions, or you can actually just email us. And we'll use this because obviously if you're asking that question, someone else is asking that question. And so we will actually publish the answers to our Your Voice. So if you are interested, I really do encourage you to register. So then you actually get, when there's changes and all that sort of stuff as well, you'll get those updates. Again, this session is actually obviously live stream, so it will be available. So if there's something that you will miss, and we will actually put the presentation actually on that side as well. So we will continue to try and keep those resources available. So, and again, if we're not the person to be able to answer the question, we will direct you in that if we believe it's an EXA question and all that sort of stuff as well. So so don't be afraid to ask questions. You can either, as I said, go on that website or just send something to our council, council@gawler.sa.gov.au as well, and we will actually respond to that sort of thing. But one of the things is, again, we'll probably respond collectively via the website as well. So everyone's informed, and we're not getting asked, if there's repeat questions, that opportunity. So.
I actually found it rather insightful. I feel like you guys had a pretty broad view across the whole thing. So even just hearing some of the things that are going to be happening towards the future with Gawler was insightful as well. I was personally quite happy with tonight, so just want to pass that on.
Thank you for doing that.
One thing you might want to consider for your next session that may be of interest that you haven't touched on tonight is campaigning. There are a number of ways you could do that, but my observation of previous elections is that there have been some very good candidates who just did not get enough votes. And so I think if you're encouraging, and you are, you say you want people to nominate and stand for council, that bit's easy. You can fill in the paperwork and do it. But it's getting yourself elected. And there's two aspects to that, I think. One is building your profile, and the second is the actual campaign process. And I benefited from doing my homework. You might remember Brian Tom. I didn't have any problem in approaching him and picking his brain on everything from what should be in a flyer to how would you get your flyers out there, Now even more there's social media, and there is the print media. So it's just a thought that you might want to consider that, and it could even be that you way facilitate that is maybe a panel of people who have campaigned who might share some of those strategies, and people might want to pick their brains because you can put a lot of energy in, a lot of money in, and get nowhere if you're not out there.
No, thank you for sharing that. One of the things I guess I have to be careful of is that we don't trip over that line about telling people how to campaign and tripping myself up in terms of getting involved in an election. I could be a bit careful with that bit. But there might be independents that are happy to help people.
And obviously the LGA and the Electoral Commission in that handbook actually does have that thing about campaigning as well. So there is a whole heap of resources available, and maybe that is part of our promotion in making sure that we direct people to the Electoral Commission, because again, as Chris says, we need to make sure that we're not the ones that are responsible for the election. Where our role here is just to give you a bit of information about what to expect and direct you to where those resources are available, because we don't want to give advice and then you potentially follow what we've said and then you end up having a complaint against you. So that's the other difficulty that we have in actually, I suppose, going to that extent of helping you or providing that campaign advice.
Because the council staff are limited by, they have to do the bureaucratic part, but they can't be seen to be showing, favour or that sort of thing. Councillors can do whatever they want, so you can come to a councillor and say, how do I campaign or whatever, and we're not bound by the staff need to be neutral in a campaign for very obvious reasons. But I think councillors, because that's the side of things that they can't really cover, is sort of how do you deal with negative feedback on Facebook, or there's all these things that crop up as a councillor, and we're happy to, I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, but I think we're happy to answer questions from anyone.
No, very good, thank you. Question up the back.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I ran last election and I only got to go to the Electoral Commission's information session, which was good, but having this earlier before the election, I think is a nice overview to have. And I wanted to say thank you for the chair. I can't sit in those chairs, I have a bad back. So yeah, my feedback for next one is have a couple different chairs. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for tonight.
No, thank you for coming. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, have a serious think. Yeah. Cheers.